but don't mind a whole bunch of common critters. If you want a whole bunch of critters, what I would recommend is this book. This is an all-inclusive guide to birds and reptiles and plants and all kinds of other things. However, just remember that it doesn't have everything in it. If it had everything in it, it'd be very interesting, because just with birds alone, there are 525 species of birds just in Florida. And that's a lot of bird species, so it would fill this book up and then some. And so these are the most common birds that you would find in Florida. So very helpful book to have. Another thing to have is binoculars. Binoculars range in sizes. This is a small little field pair. If I were backpacking, I could wear these. If I was like in a car or something, I have bigger binoculars that are can magnify things a lot more, and you can see a lot further. I also actually have a spotting scope, and those pick up things from far away. Like if you're in a forest, spotting scopes are not going to work. But if you're like looking out over a wetland and you're wanting to see the bird on the opposite shoreline and you can't see them with your naked eye and you can't see these with these, spotting scopes help a whole lot and are very good to have with you. So those are some of the key equipment things that you'll need. And then we'll move on to what are birds and why they're so important. Instead of having fur, they have feathers. So they have feathers all over them, ranging from flight feathers to downy feathers to duff and other different feathers, and all these give them flight. The downy feathers give them more insulation, and we in the past have used these downy feathers as pillows and make very good pillows, but they're also very expensive pillows. But they molt these. Molting is just meaning that they get rid of them, usually about once a year. Sometimes twice, but usually it's just once a year. It just depends on if the bird feathers have gotten damaged at all. But so feathers help them to get off the ground. We do not have any flightless birds. Flightless birds would not be able to handle Florida at all. We have too many predators, from raccoons to hawks to coyotes to wolves to pretty much everything. That our cat is another problem in our neighborhood. Just remember, as a side note, just remember that your cat that is outdoors potentially can kill millions of birds. But millions of birds die to cats every year. It's been proven by lots and lots of research. So if you're going to have an outdoor cat, just supply them with the necessary food so he's not hunting for a bird. However, they do it as a prize as well. They will kill a bird just because they can, and they'll show, hey, here's my trophy. So that's not a good thing. So please watch your cats. The other cool thing about birds is you notice that these are hollow. Bird bones are hollow inside, or partially hollow, and it makes it so they can fly. Just imagine us trying to flap our wings and fly off the ground being a mammal. Very hard to do, and we can't do it. People have tried in the past, such as Icarus is a well-known person that made wax wings and tried to fly, and he fell because the wax wings melted and he fell a long, long way, and I don't think he made it. So these help a lot. Just imagine a big eagle or a big owl, how big those things are and how much they could weigh if they did have non-hollow bones. But because they have hollow bones, a great big horned owl, which is about yay big, only weighs about 4 or 5 pounds. However, an eagle, which is about the same size, which I've gotten to hold, are about 35 to 40 pounds. It makes your arm pretty tired after a while because you have to hold them on your arm, but they're fun to have. You can't have them, but all these birds are protected by the Bird Migration Act, or Bird Treaty Act, that was put in place in the 70s because there was a plume trade going on, and so they had to protect all the feathers, and this was the way that they did it. Women like to have feathers in their hats, and had all kinds of decorative feathers coming out of their hat, and the birds took an absolute tumble, and a lot of them didn't live through it. So that's why that there's the Migration Treaty Act. So birds are now protected, but their muscles and bones are fused and have different things going on with them, making it so they can fly and not be tired. Imagine flapping all day and using your wings. It gets tiring after a while. Okay, so a little fun activity since we're talking about bird flapping. Hummingbirds flap their wings very, very, very fast. So what I want you to do right now is I want you to get up and I want you to flap your wings. And what you can do is, if you have a stopwatch or your phone and have a little timer, what I want you to do is time yourself and flap your wings as many times as you can in that minute. And so that's up to you. So you can be, and it gets tiring, but it's also good exercise. So flap your wings, flap, 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 flap. Imagine doing that for months at a time. That'd be a little bit tiring, because there are birds during certain times of the year that migrate. Or migrate is basically they go south for the winter. And they do this to escape the cold temperatures. Right here is the flyways that birds take. And you can see Mexico and Florida. Florida has both the Atlantic and the Mississippi flyway coming straight through it. Birds, for the most part, will follow these flyways, and it's basically a way of going south. And they do this every year. Some birds like to stay over and will stay in your area, but most of them will fly south for the winter. However, Florida, we have a unique situation in which it's not too cold over the winter, so a lot of birds will just stay put. If there's a lot of food available during the winter time, then they will stay put instead of flying. So wintertime is probably not the best time to find birds. The best times to find birds are probably fall and spring, because what happens is when birds fly through, you'll get all kinds of crazy birds that usually aren't here, such as waxwing. It looks like the cardinal I showed you earlier, but it's brown, and it has like a black mask on it, and it has a little line of yellow on its tail feathers. But it's likes to eat berries, and you can hear this high-pitched call that it does up in the tree, and it can be found during the winter time. We have all kinds of birds that are around. What I'd like you also to do is to put up, if you can and if you can support it, is to put up a few bird feeders. And you can look for ways in which you can do it yourself. You can make bird feeders out of milk cartons and plastic jugs and like a dowel rod. They're very easy to make. You can look up online, and they're very cheap, and you can put string on the top and you can hang them on the feeder, and birds will come to them, because I've done it in my past when I didn't have as much money. But this right here are all potentially the birds that you will find in the area. You can see some are really little and some are a little bigger. The size of the bird and where it is very helpful. Like if you're out in the forest and you see little guys, those are probably songbirds, so you're going to narrow down your search to looking for, okay, well, it's a smaller bird, it looks like it may have red or orange or whatever, and you look at the colors and you look at the size, and that will help narrow down what that bird is. If you have an app on your phone, like the Merlin Bird app, you can play the call and hear the bird. And so it's like, hey, that's what is playing on my phone. And so that helps a lot. A really cool area if you want to see all kinds of ducks and other migrational birds is the St. Mark's Wildlife Refuge, which is, I think it's Wakulla County. And, it does go into Jefferson County as well. But it's a huge area, and it has a nice lighthouse, and you can make a day of it. You can go picnicking, and but there's all kinds of birds to be seen there. If you're willing to take the time, you can find birds of all sorts, from coots to grebes to American widgeons to canvasbacks to, and you'll also see not only birds, but you'll see gators and other things. So I highly recommend St. Mark's and to go to. Very cool area and very cool park. So, but these guys are all around you. Another guy that we normally see around us is our. Anyone know what that is? It goes gobble, 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 and we like to eat it during Thanksgiving. This guy, you will hear a lot of times gobbling and doing its thing, usually early in the morning or at dusk. So dusk or dawn is when I normally hear it. There is a hunting time for these guys in the winter. So if you're a hunter, they do make good meals. And if you just happen to be in a winter area, you can see these tracks. They're in snow, and this is what they do on the ground. But they will leave tracks, and this is a very good way to know what bird has been around. Turkeys like to. They're more of a ground walking bird. They'll definitely use their feathers if they have to and fly away into a tree. Like if there's a coyote or fox or something and they need to fly away, or if there's a human flying down the road, they can get out of the way. So turkeys are very common. And turkeys are the ground dwelling birds. I've mentioned it earlier, but one classification we have is called the raptors. And they're the birds that go after everything else. They do eat meat primarily. And so they are definitely around. Our national bird is the bald eagle. The bald eagle was on the endangered species list because of a compound known as DDT, which was a chemical that farmers used on their crops, and they found out that it made eggs really sensitive and it killed a lot of these birds. So DDT has been banned across the board here, and so it's no longer accessible, which is a good thing because then a lot of our wildlife would be hurting, especially these guys. So, but that is our bald eagle. Another one that you will find, especially near water, I've almost never seen him away from water, is our osprey. He is white on his belly and on his head and basically a brown back, and they like to be near water. So he is very common. A lot of times if you're on the jungle cruise at Wakulla State Park, you'll find them. Another one that I don't have a picture of is, which is very common, is the red-shouldered hawk. It's a big hawk, about yay big, and it kind of has red on its shoulder, but it's brown and white speckly belly, and then darkish brown on its head and on its back. And also listen to its noises, because it is a very common bird that you will find. It likes to hunt other birds and is very good at it. Raptors actually have been known to take small dogs, by the way. Just FYI. So if you have a small dog and you have one of these around, I would keep an eye on that dog and not allow him, like a Chihuahua, to be out there alone. This is a pretty cool picture that I took, but it tells a story. You can see the animal was coming along, and then something hit the ground. You can see the impact marks and the tail and the feathers coming off like he's basically falling into the snow. And that basically what happened is the hawk came down and landed in the snow and grabbed probably a mouse out of the snow. So these are things you can find around your house and other places. If you're ever out at nighttime, there's two in particular owls that you will hear. Supposedly the great horned owl, which is this guy, is not very common. However, around Bannerman Road where I live, they are very common because I hear them all the time, and there's usually you can hear multiple. They go ooh, 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 and so they make noises, and typically they let you know that they're there. And because of my owl call, I've actually made friends with quite a few of them, and they've talked back to me, and I've gotten them all to chatter. So it's pretty fun, but they are about that big of a bird, and they are only out at nighttime. And what's really cool, owls are very cool birds. They have a lot of adaptations that make it so they're out at nighttime. We tried flapping earlier. So imagine flapping and not hearing anything. Imagine going and not hearing one single bit. If you took a bird wing and you flapped it like a normal bird, or if you heard birds take off from the ground, your head is whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. But not so with an owl. With an owl, they can take off and you won't hear one single thing. And it's because their feathers are able to allow the air to pass through without, they can get off the ground easily, but it makes it so they're not as heard. So they're pretty cool. They also have feathers on their claws, which is also pretty cool. And they have ears, one pointed up and one pointed down, so they can hear everything above them and everything below them. And they can turn their heads about 220 degrees around. So imagine if my head were like in the Twilight Zone and went all the way around and then some. That's what they can do. They can't quite turn that big. And their eyes are big. Their eyes are way bigger than their head, and actually makes up a quite big amount of their heads. And imagine us having like grape size or bigger size eyes, which we don't have, but they're able to use their eyes. Imagine being able to see a mouse over a mile away with only a match. And that's them. They can actually see a mouse on the ground from quite a distance away with very, 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 very little light. So think of like one star out, and they're still able to see everything around them. So they're very, very cool birds to have around. Another bird out at nighttime is this guy. This is our barred owl. He is very, very common, and he goes ooh, 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 ooh. And and I've gotten a whole lot of course by these guys. They do all kinds of other calls as well. If you're ever in a place where you can hear them, they make all kinds of funky calls that they make back and forth. I think there's something like over 100 variations of calls and things that they do. But they eat primarily meat. And one thing I didn't say about the great horned owl is if you have skunks around, you probably don't anymore. Great horned owls love skunk. Why, I don't know. That would be a pretty stinky treat, but I guess I can handle them. One guy that is a migrational bird, and with this one, what you'll have to do is if you want it around, you'll have to put up a bird feeder that has 4 parts water, 1 part sugar. And you put it in a feeder, and they're red, and they have little holes in them, so the bird can basically perch on the bird feeder and put its nose or beak down into the nectar. Water with sugar is nectar, and that's what they're wanting. But these guys are very cool. They're very small, and their wings beat about 60 to 70 times a second. So, and they are the only ones that are able to go pretty much forward, backward, side to side, up, down. Most birds can only fly up and down and forward. They can't go backwards. But it's very cool to watch these guys fly. Our littlest bird is actually called the bumblebee hummingbird, which is obviously the size of a bumblebee. But those guys like to be in forests. So if you're out walking and basically you're using all of your skills and all of your senses, what you want to do is you just want to be observant of what's around you. It's like, okay, birds like to have cavities in trees. So if you see a hole in a tree and it's up there, it may have a bird in it. There's one called the red cockaded woodpecker that is extremely endangered, that's associated with our longleaf pines in the Apalachicola National Forest. And they've made cavities in order for them to dwell in. So they're very cool to have around. But yes, just get out there. And one thing that I would like for you all to do is I would like for you to keep a bird checklist. Keep it for 2 weeks and just tell me what the bird's doing. See if you can identify it. If you say red bird, that's all right. But I prefer you to research a little bit and see. It's like, oh, well, that was a cardinal, and there's another red bird that likes to frequent our feeders called a finch. That's a smaller version, and it doesn't have the red top to it. But yes, I would like you to do that. And also check out our website and look at the other different things that are on it. There is one thing that's on it. This is called Fill the Bill. And if you notice that there's a bunch of birds over here, and then there's a bunch of animals over here. And so, and this is very similar to what is on our website. What you're going to do is try to match up the bird with what it eats. If it has a long, slender bill or beak, what do you think it eats? More than likely, it's something that is a tube shape, like a flower. And we also talked about hummingbirds recently, so that would probably be hummingbird. Pelican is this big guy, and typically he is around water. So what do you think is swimming in water that he likes to dive bomb? If you've ever watched these guys, they're pretty cool. They dive bomb the water, but he will typically eat a fish. So the owls like the mouse. This is called a barn swallow, and you'll see them darting all over and flying all kinds of crazily over fields, and they're going after insects. They are very good at catching insects on the wing, is what they say. So, and then you have a cardinal at the bottom, and then you have the seeds up here, and that's what the cardinal eats. So the beak matters as to what they eat. So like the raptor beak is able to basically tear into flesh and eat meat. And so these other beaks are adapted to what they eat. And so birds are very unique in that. And they fill a lot of different niches in our environment. And most of the time their nests, which you have a wide variation of nests behind me, come in all vast amounts of shapes and sizes. But yes, just take your time, go around water bodies, see what you can find, go into the forest. A really good place to find birds is along the edges of forests. So where there's a field and a forest and you see the very edge of it, that's called an edge habitat, and they like to fly in and out of those bushes, going to wherever they need to. But yes, there's also citizen science projects through Cornell University, as well as the Florida Fish and Wildlife that can help guide you to identifying birds around. And you can help them. You can help scientists figure out, okay, what's around. And you can also learn birds. It's pretty cool to know what birds are around you. So when you're outside, you can go, hey, that's a bald eagle, or that is a red-shouldered hawk, or that's a cardinal. Because the birds are around, but what typically happens is they fly off before you're even close. Typically, when birders go out, they have to bird by what's called bird by ear. So they bird by what they hear. If they have a really good spotting scope and they don't mind spending hours and hours and hours identifying birds, they'll get binoculars and go around. But have fun, enjoy. Thank you for joining me on this bird talk. Hopefully you haven't gone too bird crazy. But yeah, research birds. They're very cool. And join me again down the road.